Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Becoming a Powerhouse Brand. Today I am joined by the lovely Harriet Bratt, where we're going to be talking all about scaling your business with soul, like really helping you to create that impact, show up with that unapologetic power, and to do it with peace and purpose behind the voice. So this is all about speaking, showing your voice, creating an impact. And yeah, I can't wait to dive into today's episode. So welcome to the podcast, Harriet.
Thank you so much, Jackie. Absolute pleasure to be here with you and your listeners, and I'm excited for our conversation.
Yeah, excited. So just to give a bit of a insight into what it is that you do, could you just give our listeners a bit of a backstory into how you got started into what you do?
Sure. When I was a little girl, no. In a nutshell, I was in a completely different industry. I was the manager of a residential care home. And I think, like a lot of people can relate to, maybe some of your listeners are even feeling this right now. I was working 80 to 100 hours. I barely had time to see my friends and family, let alone my fiance at that time. I felt undervalued, underappreciated. I thought we were there for person-centered care, but it turned out to be more about ticking paperwork for the government. That's a whole nother podcast. But essentially, that led me to having I wouldn't say a breakdown, but certainly a burnout moment, an immensely overwhelming moment that led me to ugly cry and
We've
see.
all been there. We've all been in that
Yeah,
ugly cry
yeah,
stage.
right. You're not growing if you haven't had the mascara down the face, snot bubble type of cry. And I think for me, it was in that moment that I just said, enough's enough. There has to be more. And I'll be completely honest, I'm not giving this as a strategy. I'm just sharing my truth and my story. I saw an advert in the local newspaper that said, do you want more freedom? Do you want more flexibility? Do you want to be your own boss? And do you want more positivity? Well, it could have been for anything. I was a yes, I was in.
Yeah,
But through that, it was actually for network marketing. And through that, I found personal development. And really, that's where the journey began. I became obsessed with the feeling of self-growth, understanding our behavior, the awareness of being able to make conscious choices for yourself about how you live your life and what you do. And I just became obsessed with it and very naturally started speaking. That came into training speakers. I then, of course, use experiential breakthroughs such as the fire walk. One of the biggest fears is public speaking, right? So if we can feel the fear and walk the fire, we can feel the fear and get on the stage. So that's a little bit about me and how I ended up speaking.
I love that. So you actually help people with walking through that fire and getting on that stage.
Literally,
That is
literally.
amazing. How did that come about? Is that something you actually experienced yourself in kind of your awakening?
Absolutely, absolutely. It was, I'm sure many of you and you, Jackie, have heard of Tony Robbins
Yeah.
and his main event, UPW. That was my first experience. And I really enjoyed it. And I don't want to knock Tony because I've taken so much from him, each to their own, their thoughts, but I learned so much from him. But if I'm really honest, it wasn't that experience. I found walking across the cold gravel car park harder and more intense than going across the coals, but it was still profound. It was still meaningful, and I could see what it did for people around me. And then a few weeks later, when I was doing one of my own, not running it, I was in student mode. I was learning, and there was a firewalk experience, but this time there was only 30 people. It was a round fire instead of a one lane walk. So you got more time on the fire, you got to walk more times, etc. And not only was I blown away by what I took from it, like my own message, because that's the beauty of the fire, right? Everyone receives their own message from it or what they
Yeah.
need. It's not someone else telling you, and it's an experience that you feel and connect with from within. So what it did for me, but also the group, right? Because at that time I was always already facilitating events. And I just saw and noticed how everybody felt after walking that fire. And it just became a no-brainer. I went and got myself qualified. And it's an experience that I lead for hundreds of people around the world now. And it's just such an accelerated way of being able to feel the fear. I don't care who you are or where you come from. If you stand in front of that fire and you feel that heat, fear shows up. So
Yeah.
it's about being able to take that breath and make that conscious choice. And it could be a no, right? We're not here to force everybody to
Yeah.
walk. But all I ask is check in with yourself. Is it a no because it's an aligned no and it's not your moment? Or is it a no from fear, in
Yeah.
which just check in with yourself. But the majority of people every time do walk. So they feel that fear, they make their conscious choice and they walk. And then, of course, in your life, right? How many times does fear show up in our lives, Jackie? Like
Oh my God.
sending the email, having the difficult conversation, getting
Yeah.
on the stage, whatever it might be, it's different for all of us. But when you have that experience in such a visceral way with the fire, when fear shows up in your life, it's just that same practice, flexing that muscle of
Yeah.
I feel the fear, but I'm making my choice and I'm acting on what's important.
Yeah, like you say, it is that muscle memory, isn't it? Once you've experienced it once, you know what tools and how you can reframe things, reset yourself, ground yourself to then move forward, can't you?
Exactly, exactly.
Yeah. And I know you talk about the warrior within, which I love, and that power, and I talk a lot about leadership. So I'm always helping others to see that they are the main character in their own story, that they
Uh-huh.
get to write their own story, that they are the focus, they are their personal brand. But it doesn't mean that you need to be shouting from the rooftops. Power doesn't have to be loud, does it? It can be quiet, it can be peaceful and tranquil.
Absolutely. And I love that you've brought this to the table, probably more so than ever before this year, but it kind of kicked in last year. I shifted from that, um, for want of better terminology, like masculine to feminine, that
Yeah.
very aggressive, determined, forceful, pushing. I had a lot of ego. I had a mask on. And again, going through that process of being able to heal myself allowed that understanding of, as you've just said so beautifully, like power from the core, peaceful power, and really owning who you are in each moment and understanding that we feel different on different days, but having the confidence to show up consistently in a way that feels right for you. And for me, that peaceful power is all about leading with love. You know, as speakers, we talk about communicating from live and virtual stages, but before you even think about communicating externally, how are you talking to you?
Yeah.
How do you speak to yourself inside of your mind? Because that absolutely influences how you feel and what actions you take, and therefore what results you receive. So I think it's self-talk and being able to come out of your head and into your heart. But it's certainly a process, especially if you've been someone that's very independent, very dominant. You've had to do a lot of things for you, be the warrior for yourself, right?
Yeah.
So for me, it was that shift of yes, absolutely, unleash your warrior, but also how do we then bring that into a sustainable day-to-day power?
Yeah, beautiful. And I think, isn't it interesting? Because actually, female leadership is still relatively new, really. So it's always been a very masculine thing. It was always the men, they were the hunter-gatherers, they were the ones that did all the things, and the women were there to be the soft, feminine ones and care for the family. Like that was always what the roles were. Whereas now we're getting these opportunities, we're having the space to be the leader. And actually, I think very much so that we're still kind of finding our way of doing it, aren't we? We're still finding our way of leading from purpose, from soul. And I've definitely noticed the huge shift. Maybe it's just because I've been tapping into this work more in the last year or so, but I've definitely noticed the shift in the female leaders that I see, that I'm connected to, that I'm inspired by, in how they're showing up. And I think it is this constant evolution, isn't it, of really understanding how to lead as a woman, that you do need to have that balance, don't you? You do need to have some masculine energy because that is business, right? But actually, we get to be more in flow with our feminine side.
Absolutely. It's being able to dance in the duality of both, right?
Yes.
But I so agree with you. And I think, during COVID, the president of New Zealand, and even just recently, I read about I'm not sure, please excuse my naivety, if she was a prime minister or president, I'm guessing president of Mexico, and her response in sending support to Texas. And despite everything that's going on in the US, and we're not here to have a podcast about that, I just thought it was inspirational to see a female leader make a stand against a very dominant male leader and act from love, act from what was best for the people, and not just within her country, but within an entirely different country and state.
Yeah.
And I think that's an example of femininity and of leading with love, leading with support. But she absolutely wouldn't be in that position without the drive, the determination, and some of that masculine side too.
Yeah. How do you think kind of the way we're raised as children has impacted how we show up as women, as being those leaders? Because obviously, we're, for the majority of us that do go into school, we're kind of taught to be in competition with one another, to get the grades, to do really well in exams, to follow this kind of set strategy, when actually that's not always aligned to who we are and what we're here to serve. So I'm just wondering, like, how you feel in terms of breaking down those barriers and almost getting back connected to who we are and rewriting our own story, because we're just programmed for such a huge part of our lives as children to be a certain way, to be in competition, to kind of be the best at this, to win the prize, to win the race and get the best grades and everything. So yeah, I'd love to know your take on that.
I very much agree with what you're sharing, and I think, obviously different cultures, different backgrounds, different families is going to be an extremely different experience. I've got friends whose parents have been into personal development since they were little, so they had those conversations, that style of communication led by example to provide options, opportunity, empowerment for their children. But I would say for the majority of people, that wasn't the case. So not just in school, but even from your parents, you were constantly being programmed to do things a certain way. And for me, not just for women, but both, we don't get taught or inspired to the abundance of opportunities that are out there and for the many different ways, and not just through the work that I do, but the amount I get to travel. That's never been clearer. There's 8 billion people in this world. There are so many different ways of doing things, and with technology these days, the opportunities have never been greater. So for me, it's not just the programming in school of what you should do, it's the lack of awareness in how much variety in life there is. And it's okay to choose your path and have support in that.
Yeah, beautiful. So, if you do you think that there is a space for every single woman and man, like whoever's listening to this, to become a leader? Because I know, particularly when I was earlier on in my business stage, and I know some people listening to this now, maybe they're not even in the scaling stage and they are in the earlier stage, that actually they just don't see themselves as a leader. They're very much in the, I'll follow the path, I'll do what brings in some income, I'll get some clients, but they're not necessarily positioning themselves or want to be a leader. Do you think that kind of leadership role is available to everybody?
Do I think it can be enhanced and trained in everybody? Yes. Do I think it's a natural talent or even driver in many people? No. And I think there's beauty in both of those. To just step slightly back from business, I actually think for a slightly different perspective, everybody is the leader of their own life.
Yeah,
So no matter who you are, yes, you are a leader. And it's up to you how you choose to lead your life and your path. But certainly when it comes to business, I think again, it's really taking the time to get to know yourself. You know, are you a great leader? Do you enjoy it? Do you want to learn more? Do you observe and see other leaders in action and learn? Is it something that inspires you, just the very understanding of leadership? Because for many, it isn't. And at the same time as needing leaders, we also need those number twos or that team, right? They're just as valuable and just as important. You wouldn't have a leader if you didn't have the wing woman or the wingman and the team below, and then the movement and the people or the customers, the clients, whichever language is relevant for the listeners, without having everybody contributing different areas. There's an incredible video on YouTube that shows, a leader that there's loads of people sitting out on a hill at a music festival, and one person decides to get up and dance. But it's only when the second person comes and dances with them that it becomes more of a collection, that the third
yeah,
person joins, the fourth person joins. And it was the leader was brave enough to stand up and represent that, but the second person joining gave permission for others to come and follow too.
I love
So
that.
it's kind of a bizarre answer. I think we're all the leaders of our own life, but I think in business, it's really checking in with yourself and seeing what are your skill sets, what is your personality type, and what lights you up. One of my really good friends, Olivia, just loves being the number two. She loves supporting someone with an incredible vision. For me, I love being the leader. I love having that overall vision and being able to work with a team to delegate areas to carry that vision out.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
don't think that was my best succinct answer, but that's what came out in the moment.
Great answer. You mentioned that, was it a year ago that you felt like you were running maybe more into your ego, and that that's been a bit of a journey for you to be able to really lean into more of your heart and your soul. And I think that is definitely something I can totally relate to, because I think when I started becoming that leader, when I moved away from having a brand agency where, yeah, I did lead a team, but I started to position myself as a mentor. And I definitely think in the earlier stages of that transition, I was running on ego. So, how would you say somebody can go about not necessarily just speaking, but just sharing what it is that they're here to do, becoming that leader from soul and not ego? What would you say? Like, can you notice the difference, do you think?
Oh, absolutely, 100%. I feel, and again, it will be different for everybody and it will show up in different ways. But again, it comes back to that beautiful know thyself, right? Really understanding who you are and how you show up. And for me, the difference of noticing when I was wearing a mask, when I was performing, when I needed to be right, when I had an agenda that had to be heard rather than feeling the room or listening to the team, I was very dominating. And I think it was longer ago than the year for the ego side. I see and I personally felt that when we find personal development, there almost is that stage of ego, right? Because
Yeah.
you've been inside of your mind, you've been self-doubting, you've been insecure, you've been procrastinating, you've been questioning, whatever it might be, but you've not felt great. So when you finally find personal development and coaches, for me, and I think listeners may be able to relate to this, it's kind of easy to get into that ego because it's like, oh my goodness, yes, I am amazing. I am fantastic. I do have so much potential. I do have so much power. So does everybody. But you realize it for yourself. So it's easy to get into that ego. And, I remember walking around events with my shoulders up and head like in presenter mode. And it served to give me drive to keep going. But as an individual, as a leader, and as a speaker, there was a massive disconnect. And when I allowed myself, first of all, to let go of the ego, and it still shows up at times, of course, I'm human, but to let go of the ego, to stop the need of being right, to take down my mask. And, if I'm not feeling great, share that. If I'm feeling great, share that. Share all of the ups, downs, highs, lows, the real, raw, vulnerable side. And it was only through a progressional, consistent, conscious decision to take a breath, pause, don't react. Take a breath, pause, don't react. Listen to yourself and really choose your response. And I actually ended up getting a little tattoo here, which means lead with love. And for me, it's that constant reminder, lead with love for yourself first, lead with love for your loved ones, your friends, your families, your teams, and then lead with love for the masses and excuse me, and the universe beyond that. So that sign for me was very much about coming out of your head and into your heart. When you're in your head, it's all about us, the ego. When you're in your heart, it's about who you're serving. So for me, that was probably the biggest game changer to step more into that feminine side.
Yeah. And I guess it's that like grounding in your power as well, isn't it? It's really coming back and reconnecting with who you are. So
Absolutely.
how do you, if you were
And
somebody, oh
I
sorry.
no, 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 you're all good. I just suddenly thought that I really want to share this with everybody. I think it's embracing all of it, like truly, not just saying it as a fun thing to say, but like really understanding that life, business especially, has ups and downs. So it's not about feeling like inspired, empowered, on top of the world in every second of every
Yeah.
day. It's more about how do we, you spoke about this so beautifully earlier. How do we have that more peaceful power? How do we have that more calm, content? So embrace all of it, the messy magnificence, the mistakes, the times that are hard, because they teach us so much if you choose to see that perspective. So it's not just about always seeking to feel great and to be empowered. It's about riding the duality of all the emotions
Yeah.
and finding that calmer path for you through it all.
Yeah. So you help women to speak powerfully on stage, to really share their voice and create an impact. How do you own the stage whilst still being in your soft and that divine feminine? Like, do you need to? Because I feel like when people hear the words speak on stage, you think of this absolute powerhouse coming on and like really owning and putting up a performance and a show and wearing the beautiful, like big, elaborate outfit. But that's not always the case, is it? I know some of the best speaker sessions that I've personally witnessed have been the ones where they have been very real, very raw. Like even cried. And I remember hearing something recently actually where someone said, don't ever cry on stage. It's really bad. Like, don't show that. And actually, like, they're the ones that connect with the audience, aren't they? So, how do you like really embrace that softness and still own the stage, so to speak?
Oh my gosh. Can we do another podcast? There's so much to say. I think, again, first of all, for me, and I think this will help anybody, who you are on stage should only ever amplify who you are off stage. So if you come and see me speak, you're going to see me acting the exact same way in my kitchen, out with my friends. It just might be amplified depending on the size of the room. What I would also say is trust yourself. Again, it comes back to knowing yourself, right? Knowing yourself in your day-to-day life. If you are someone who is calmer, who is quieter, who is not as expressive, I used to say high energy, but you can be very still and have immensely high energy. So I like to say expressive. I am naturally a very expressive person. When I'm talking to my husband, I'm using my hands, I'm getting
Yeah,
excited, right? So that's my style. I had to practice through my evolvement, as I shared a moment ago, bringing more of that softness. But when I did, when I got more present, when I held moments of silence, when I gave much more audience interaction, when I shared my real raw truths, and one of the most impactful talks I ever gave was when I nearly split with my husband, and that was a tearful moment. I very much agree with you. It's not about not sharing the emotion, it's about not breaking down on stage. But
yeah,
actually, sharing that real and raw is the power. That is the connector. That is the impact in that moment. But so it's knowing yourself and showing up as that. But I would also encourage you to look at speakers like Sadhguru. Have you heard of Sadhguru?
yes,
So he's not a woman, but he exudes a very feminine style of leadership. Now he sits on stage cross-legged. He doesn't move around the stage. He doesn't walk around the stage. He sits and he responds to questions and
yeah,
then elaborates or riffs through that. And he's one of the most well-known speakers with one of the biggest followings. So there is no right or wrong way to show up as a speaker. The best way is to show up fully as you in all of that glory, the shitty side, the hard time, the tough time, the rough bit, but also being able to celebrate, because that's another thing people find really difficult from stages is to talk about yourself in a positive way. I found that difficult. It felt like bragging, but now I understand, no, it's inspirational. Someone can say, "Oh my gosh, if they've been through that and they did this, I can do it too."
yeah,
It's really again just being able to trust yourself, but I think it's that biggest core knowing of who you are and showing up as that
yeah.
on stage.
Beautiful. Do you have any sort of rituals or like recharges, any practices that you do before you go on stage to sort of ground yourself, get yourself prepped and ready to go on?
Yes, 90% of the time I am doing something very calm. I've just shared a moment ago, I'm that type of speaker that is like, yes, let me out there. I'm ready. I'm good to go. So actually, for me, I need to sit. I sit, close my eyes, I'll have headphones on, I'll have a very calm piece of music, and I will just literally be grounding myself calmly backstage because otherwise I go out like a Tasmanian devil and it's overwhelming, it's way too much. However, on occasions where perhaps I'm tired, I'm exhausted, maybe I've flown in from somewhere or something's going on in life, right? Life's shown up and I need more energy. In that case, again, for me, music is always that key. I will play some of my favorite tracks. I'll stand in a power pose or I'll literally dance backstage just to raise my energy to go and meet the audience in that moment.
Love that. So, how can our listeners work with you? How can they find out more about what it is that you do and get that support with getting that confidence and owning the stage in a way that's totally aligned and beautiful for them?
I love how you word this, and I love that it's recorded. Sure. Anyone that wants to connect, if you just want to share any insights that you've gained from this conversation, or if you've got any questions, I'm on all social media, Harriet Bratt Speaker. I invite you to drop into my DMs. And I also have a free group on Facebook. It's called Fem Vox, Fireside Fem Vox, Female Voice. fireside. And I've literally just launched this actually. We've switched. I had a group for about 6 years that grew very well, but I've shifted into just working with women. So it is a brand new, fresh group. So it's a great time to join. And again, it's just pretty much daily resources, inspiration, strategies, support, encouragement to
Whoop.
get fully into your power, lead with love, and speak and sell with aligned confidence.
I love that. Well, thank you so much for coming on the podcast today, Harriet. For those of you that have listened to this and really enjoyed this episode, please do reach out to Harriet. Let us know what you think of this episode, and please do leave a 5-star review if you haven't already. I will see you in the next one. And thanks again, Harriet. I'll see you again.
Thank you, Jackie, and thank you, everybody.
Bye.